Michael Wittmann, the most famous tank commander of the Third Reich. His combat mentality was determined, aggressive, and disciplined. He was able to condense the spirit of the World War II Panzer units into one person. Although 78 years have passed since his death, his legacy and his aura live on today. In today's show, we're going to discuss 4 main Wittmann curiosities, along with a series of extra final details for all those who stay until the end of the video. In them we will see, for example, what happened to his wife after his death, the discovery of Wittmann's remains, or what happened to his house. With that said, let's get started. The first curiosity leads us to what Wittmann had to do with his MP40 in multiple combats, from the hatch of his Tiger. And it is that, to the surprise of many, there were many occasions in which our Panzer commander was forced to fire from the cupola of his battle tank, against enemies who tried to board him. This used to happen when his armor suffered a breakdown or got stuck in a ditch, after which he became an easy target for his enemies. When this happened, usually the enemy anti-tank guns would direct their fire at it, and the Soviet infantry would move towards the tank that was having difficulties, to try to assault and destroy it. On one occasion, when Wittmann's Tiger found himself in this situation, he saw how several Soviet soldiers approached him from behind, unable to use the machine guns on his armor to shoot them down. Because of this, Wittmann had to draw his MP40 and open the hatch of his Tiger to start firing from it. As soon as the hatch was opened, he surprised a Soviet soldier who was already right next to it, and for tenths of a second, he was able to open fire first and shot him down. Quickly Wittmann turned to another enemy soldier, and this time it was the Soviet who fired earlier with his pistol, but luckily for the German, the bullet grazed his cheek and did not cause more damage than a scratch, after which Wittmann was able to take him down too. Meanwhile, his driver was able to get the battle tank out of that ditch, and Wittmann, still dazed, was able to be attended by his loader, who told him that he had been very lucky, and that he would only have a small scar to remember. This anecdote helps us to see that no matter how good one may be, there are always events that depend on luck, and which cannot be counted on. Although it cannot be confirmed, it is possible that this photo shows the wound caused by this bullet, which grazed his lower lip. In the next point, we want to mention an anecdote that occurred when Wittmann was awarded the Knight's Cross. It was specifically on January 9, 1944, when, after destroying 6 new Soviet armored vehicles, Wittmann reached 66 destroyed enemy tanks. While his recommendation for the Knight's Cross was pending, Wittmann shot down a further 22 Soviet tanks between 13 and January 14, reaching the 88 victory mark by the day of his award. It should be noted that during those weeks, the fighting on the Eastern Front was very intense. When Wittmann found out that he was going to be decorated, he broke all protocol and regulations, and refused to receive this medal if his shooter Bobby Wall did not receive it at the same time as him. Wittmann did not give himself all the credit, and he always boasted about how lucky he had been to have in his team a shooter with such good aim as Bobby Wall, and for that he demanded that Baltasar also be awarded. It was here that a problem arose, because the Knight's Cross was initially reserved only for officers of the German army, for extraordinary acts of leadership and courage in the face of the enemy. The problem therefore was that his shooter had the rank of sergeant. However, after careful consideration, he finally agreed, and his shooter Bobby Wall was also decorated, with both men earning the much-valued medal. Due to the large number of armor he ended up destroying that same month, he would also be awarded the Oak Leaves for his Knight's Cross. It was as a result of this decoration that Wittmann met Hitler in person for the first time, as we are seeing in the image. The last decoration Wittmann received, also at the hands of Hitler, was at the end of June 1944, for his action at Villers-Bocage. On this occasion, the swords for his Knight's Cross were also awarded. A month and a half later, he would be killed in combat. And it is precisely on this question of his death that we are going to speak in this new point. As we all know, Wittmann's Tiger was shot down on August 8, 1944, while trying to stop the offensive that the Allies had launched in the direction of Falaise, known as Operation Totalize. The usual procedure for reporting a death in combat was to find the body, thereby certifying the death of the soldier. Wittmann, however, was killed in an action in which his tank was left in enemy territory. Even so, a group of German soldiers who clung to the idea that Wittmann was still alive went that same afternoon to the area where he had been shot in the hope of finding him alive there. They finally returned without finding anything. Although today we know that he died on August 8, at the time the action occurred 78 years ago, the question was not so clear. It was possible that he had made it out of the Tiger alive, or that he was being held prisoner by the Allies, so following the usual procedure, he was not declared killed in action. In this file note issued on October 9, 1944, we can see how it was then that he was declared missing in action, since his body was not found, and there was no news that he was a prisoner. On the other hand, and according to statements by his gunner Balthasar Wall, who was not with Wittmann that day, everyone knew he had died, as there were eyewitnesses who had seen the turret of his Tiger blow up, but this did not alter the standard procedure. And finally, the last curiosity of the program is the ways in which Wittmann could have prevented his death. When a war breaks out, one of the first things every country does is create national heroes who serve as inspiration for the rest of the soldiers. Michael Wittmann was undoubtedly one of them, being one of the most famous in Germany. While these kinds of idols are great for boosting morale, they also have their drawback when they eventually die in combat. When Wittmann is sent home in the spring of 1944, Hitler himself personally asks him to leave the front lines and become a professor of armored cars at some military academy. After being fighting since the first campaign of the war, Wittmann was presented with the opportunity to leave the front line and live a quieter life together with his recent wife. As many did in his place, Wittmann rejected this offer and said that his position was in the front lines along with his men, as he was not going to abandon them. Quite possibly, had Wittmann accepted this offer as a professor, he would have survived the war, and today we would have his memoirs written by him. After his most famous action, this being that of Villers-Bocage on June 13, 1944, there is a new attempt to send him to an academy as an instructor, but finally Wittmann asks to return to the front. Finally, in the action that cost him his life, his direct superior, this being Kurt Meyer, recommended that he not participate in the action, since heavy casualties were expected in said defensive operation. In addition, Wittmann did not have to participate in the action because he was not associated with said unit, but even so, he insisted on going to help in any way he could. It was here that he was finally struck down, much to the dismay of all his companions. As expected and due to his popularity, the news of his disappearance was not made official and was kept secret for some time from the German population. Having seen these 4 curiosities in depth, let's briefly see a whole series of details about him more quickly, as an extra for those who have endured until the end. Her young wife Hildegard remarried after the death of her husband, and she died in 2007. Wittmann was finally found in 1984 and sent to the Le Cambay Cemetery in Normandy. His gunner Walt went to his grave to visit him every year since his body was recovered. Wittmann's tombstone was stolen from the Le Cambay Cemetery 7 years ago, and a new one had to be put in place. Despite never accepting an order from his superiors to withdraw from the battlefield, Wittmann did force his subordinates to do so when ordered to do so. In the Norman town of Villers-Bocage, where the Panzer Ace had his most famous action, they have rebuilt a model in the town hall describing all his action. I personally was able to visit her a few weeks ago. And finally, and as a last curious detail, the house where Wittmann was born was accidentally bombed and the vast majority of the photos he had of his childhood and youth were lost forever. And so far this special program on Michael Wittmann, which I hope has been of interest to you. If you want to see another similar one but by Otto Carius, I leave you this program in the description. We say goodbye here. Many thanks to everyone, especially the sponsors who make this possible. Subscribe and share this program if you liked it, and see you in the next one. See you soon.